Thank you for tuning into the Devy Devotional Podcast, a monthly show focusing on Devy prospects, strategies, and incoming rookies. Now here's your host.
And welcome back to the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I am your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox86 on Twitter. And tonight we're going to be talking to you about some Devy Sleepers. We've talked to you about all the 23 rookie class. We've gone into detail of the 23 incoming freshmen. We've covered everything that we could possibly cover. But I think it's time to move on to more, Devy things. And I think that it's a good idea to discuss some sleepers here, some players that you could be trading for either during or even before your supplemental drafts or, upcoming Devy drafts, whatever it may be, whether it's Devy or C2C. And, we have some players that we're at least fairly excited about that could possibly take that next step that aren't being discussed quite a bit. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. While everyone else is discussing whether the 2023 rookie class is good or not, we're going to be talking about some Devy Sleepers. But first, let's bring in Aaron. How are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing really well. And in preparation for this show, just looking at guys that piqued our interest, I noticed a lot more running backs on the list. Just kind of randomly. I know you listed some wide receivers that caught your eye as well. So we'll get into a bunch of different positions today. But I'm really excited about some of these running backs. Not all of them are going to hit, but that's why they're sleepers, right? They have an opportunity. If things align correctly, they can really, really make a big jump in value. And, it's not going to happen for all of them.
Absolutely, and there's definitely some that have better odds than others, if you will. But we can get into all that here in a minute. Aaron, before we dive into the sleepers, what do you think of? I know we've talked about all the 2023 class over and over again and everything, but what do you think of all the recent discourse with the 23 rookie class and how it all sucks? Lance Zierlein's grades came out today, and apparently the entire draft class sucks. So are we all just doomed now? All these people that invested.
Yep. Sell, panic, sell, get out while you can. No, I've been trying to ignore it, though I do think that Lance Zierlein's grades for running backs are historically pretty accurate. So I will be taking a little bit deeper look. I just briefly glimpsed at those ranks. The first couple ones checked out. I think it was Bijan, Shamir Gibbs, Zach Evans, if I'm going off the top of my head. That actually sounds correct based on just some of the film that I've watched as well. But
I think it was a Bonaconda after that.
Yeah, interesting. And he's a guy that we've mentioned as a sleeper. I'm very surprised he's right after that, to be honest. But yeah, I think that I think that'll be an interesting list to dissect, I guess.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny. I just more and more I keep seeing these tweets about how people are getting scared and everything's just run for the hills, and I don't know. It just blows my mind. I wish that I could actually take advantage of that in some of my leagues, but it doesn't seem like any of my league mates believe that. It's just these random tweeters on Twitter.
Right. I almost tried to sell. I didn't really try to sell Izzy very hard, but I did try to sell Tajay Spears, just with all of the hype from the Senior Bowl, and I didn't try as hard as maybe I should have. And now that hype has settled down, who knows if he's still a great sell, but I don't know. He's at least rising on everybody's board. And as you were just talking about, people get to the process later and later if their focus is more dynasty compared to Devy, C2C, college evaluations. So I definitely think that there's still room to sell if you aren't really sold on Tajay Spears being an asset.
I agree. Toronto Dave says Devin Achane was high on Zierlein's list as well. And I mean, we've discussed Achane quite a bit over the past couple of years, and it's never really been a talent thing. We believe that he is talented. We believe he has that elite speed. So it's not really that. It's just, is a team going to actually give him the rock 15 times, 20 times a game? And that's going to be the main concern for me. But you never know. I mean, crazier things have happened. Maybe he, like Travis May that we had on 2 weeks ago, maybe he will put on 5, 10, 15 pounds, something like that, once he gets into an NFL weight room and then actually be able to do something. It's just it's a bigger question mark than than maybe just is the player good. And that's really, you know, where it comes to like the talent versus the perspective that he's actually going to do something in the NFL, and trying to figure out where you should draft him, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, not to make this into a Devin and Shane podcast, but it's like if he does put on 15 pounds at 21 years old, I'm assuming. I mean, that's tough. You're gonna lose some sort of athleticism with that, and I'm not saying he'll become a bad athlete because he's already an amazing athlete. But like, if you go from an amazing athlete to just a good one, well, you're taking away his best asset is his athleticism, his efficiency, his explosiveness for those big plays. So I don't know. I mean, if we see the weight gain, I also think that some of his other game could slightly dip, but it'd still be very interesting to see where he weighs in, and that's cool to hear that he's pretty highly rated by some of those prominent film analysts.
The F word. The good old F word. No. All right. So like I said, we're going to be discussing some sleepers here. We both came up with a fair amount of players that we are interested to see, or, you know, maybe we're willing to go ahead and trade for these players because we think they're going to take the next step this upcoming year. And it's not going to be in any particular order, really. Like we're not ranking these players 1 through 20 or anything like that. It's just kind of whoever came to mind first. Although I will say that I'm kind of excited about this first player. Toronto Dave says the F word. I'm kind of excited about this player just because he's going to help my boy out in North Carolina. Devontae Walker transferring over from Kent State over to UNC and helping my boy Drake May. I think that Andy from the Full Tilt Devy Pod is not a big Devontae Walker fan. I can give you my idea or my opinion here in a minute, but what do you feel about Walker?
I mean, he's a guy who pops analytically for sure, and his speed, athleticism, all that stuff is going to be very coveted. Well, it was coveted, and him going to UNC, yes, that's going to be a big break for Drake May, just because May was losing his clearly best receiving option in Josh Downs. So he really needed that because the loss of their offensive coordinator at UNC is going to be, I guess, throw some unknowns into the situation. I don't doubt Drake May's talent by any means, but a different system, one that's probably less pass happy or just friendly, should be interesting, I guess, to see how that offense looks in comparison to how it's looked for quite a few years. So getting back to Walker, though, I mean, he probably slots in as the best wide receiver there, really. I mean, he's a guy who has plenty of college experience, 2 years, and really had an excellent season this last year. And you look at what UNC has otherwise. I mean, I understand that a lot of people are encouraged by some of the young talent they have there, but it's not as proven. So we do have to consider, though, when we say sleeper, like to some right now, I think Devontae Walker, he's overrated to some because some are taking him in the 5th. And I would say, whoa. I mean, or I guess not overrated, overdrafted, I guess would be a better phrase for that. I think he's being overdrafted in some instances. In a C2C startup, going in the 5th, it just seems a little bit aggressive for my liking, just because he still is that unknown. But going to a great quarterback and situation there for a lot of opportunity. So if we think that, vacated targets can go his way, another dirty phrase there, but then he could have a very good season. But what do you think, John?
Well, first of all, is it Devon Trez? Because you put an R in the an extra R in the show sheet, and then you just said it, and I've only ever seen Devontae Walker.
I think you're right. I'm sorry. I think I saw that once, so I put that in all my notes everywhere. And then I don't think that's the case, so I'm sorry.
I just looked it up just to make sure that I wasn't crazy, and I'm like, I've looked into him quite a bit at this point, and I don't think there's an R in there. But yeah, Aaron knows what he's talking about most of the time, so I just wanted to make sure. So Devontae Walker. I think even if you take my love for Drake May and even kind of becoming love for like North Carolina, I love Sam Howell, I love Drake May, love Josh Downs. Toronto does too. Shout out Drake May, shout out Josh Downs. But even if you take all that away, if you just talk about the situation that Devontae Walker's walking into, where, like you said, vacated targets, whatever you want to call it. There's just no one there hardly, or no one of substance. I think that you would be excited about this regardless of where he goes. Now throw in the fact that you have, at the very least, a top 2 QB in the class throwing to him, and I think that you can really truly get excited. Now, I will say it's not going to be, it's not a guarantee that he's just going to be amazing or anything like that, because he is coming from the MAC, I think it is. He's coming from a lower level of competition, and so we can't guarantee anything. I think we both really like Jacob Cohen, and he didn't quite take that step forward that maybe we thought he was going to when he moved from G5 to Pac-12. Maybe it's going to be something similar with Devontae, but like I said, he has every opportunity to do it. But the thing is, when you look at his stats and what he's done in the MAC, it's unbelievable. So even if he takes a step back from what he was doing in the MAC, I didn't mean to rhyme, but I did. He could easily still just be a true stud. I mean, you're talking about 20. Oh, wait, I was on the wrong screen. You're talking about 20.4 yards per reception for his college career, 24.8 for his best season. Like, that's unbelievable. I mean, that's just dominating per reception. And then, while he doesn't have these huge grandiose totals or anything, only 921 receiving yards, when you look at the offense that he was playing in, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. So I don't, 3.35 yards per team pass attempt, 75 receptions per game. Let's see, 35 point or almost a 36% market share, like all the stuff that we love to see from these stud players. Now, once again, it's coming from the MAC. So I'm very excited about Devontae Walker. Maybe a little too excited, but I think that where he's going in drafts right now, and he is creeping up. More and more people are talking about him and everything, but he probably doesn't have as much excitement as he should, given the opportunity he actually has.
Yeah, no, absolutely fair. And I think I saw 50% dominator rating this last year somewhere, which would be crazy if that's true. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't get in the dominator rating. I know, some people love it and everything. Market share has always been my jam, but yeah, that would be wild. And it wouldn't be all that surprising either, because, I talk about PPR points per touch as like one of my favorite metrics that I look at. And that kind of like looks at the same thing as dominator rating, because you're talking about how many touchdowns and all that kind of stuff. He had 4.68 PPR points per touch. Like, that is just massive. Just for, and obviously we're talking about MAC versus Big Ten and all that kind of stuff, but just to put into it like a little bit of context, Marvin Harrison Jr. had 3.9 this season. So it just shows you like how unbelievable he was, albeit against very much lower level competition. So I'm pretty excited, if you can't tell, for Devontae Walker. And I think that I guess if we had to choose one player out of this entire list, he probably would be my favorite, like the one that I would say, go get this player no matter what.
Yeah, pretty much no matter what. I mean, again, the 5th round in the startups, that's already a pretty aggressive price point, but that's not in every draft. That's just in one of the most recent C2C mock drafts through campus2canton.com. So that is just one mock draft. You might be able to get him much later in supplemental or startups. So yes, definitely try to get him if you can, for sure.
Yeah, I have him as my wide receiver. Let's see, 23 right now. So once not saying he's a stud or anything like that, but for Devy purposes, wide receiver 23, you're probably getting him quite a bit later than that, and so I think that somebody you should probably take a shot on.
Yeah, wide receiver 11 in the 24 class for me.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I like it. I'd have to sit there and break them up, looking at the 24 and 25 class and all that kind of stuff. But we won't get into all that. Let's move on to the next player. Now, this is one that you're going to have to talk about, because I really know nothing about Malik Benson, a JUCO transfer, but going to Alabama. Obviously we're excited about that. We don't have like proven studs at Bama, so there's definitely opportunity there as well. I just really don't know a lot about Benson. I know that he was the number one JUCO player in this class, like transfer, whatever you want to call it. So I know that other people are excited about him. I just don't know exactly why they're all excited about him.
Yeah, that makes sense, but he was a highly coveted JUCO transfer for sure. Some of the best teams were after this guy, and a lot of it has to do with his speed. He's a 10-4 100-meter dash guy, so that's insanely fast. And it's not like he's just this tiny little guy either. I mean, he's got decent enough size. Last I saw was 6'1", 185, and he's just a dynamic playmaker. He wasn't necessarily asked to run this diverse route tree in JUCO. Is he completely ready for that Bama bump for competition level and the expected competition there? I'm not so sure. He was just drafted in the 7th round, which seems kind of right in this recent startup mock for C2C leagues at least, and I think that's fair. He's a big time upside play. Like, think about Jamison Williams coming in, but the issue is that Jamison Williams was coming in from Ohio State. He was blocked because of the great talent there. Malik Benson started off at JUCO, so less of a known commodity, I guess, of sorts. But ultimately, I mean, if he has that athleticism, Alabama really believes this was the guy to get out of the transfer portal. This was the one guy they prioritized. Else, I mean, they're not active elsewhere trying to get wide receiver talent in the transfer portal right now. So Ja'Cory Brooks, you look at some of the other guys, some of the young guys there, Isaiah Bond, Kobe Prentice. I guess Jermaine Burton still would be involved, but Malik Benson seems like another guy who could just jump up into that starting lineup. And then we have to consider that it might be slightly a down year for the receiving game at Alabama as well. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited for the player himself, but don't expect mega production year one necessarily.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question was, even if you're excited about the player, if you think he can get on the field because there's not that many proven options, how is that going to matter? We don't even know who the QB is going to be just yet. And man, if it's Jalen Milroe, I'm really not excited. I don't think that he's a proven passer. I don't know that he's going to be able to take some massive leap this year. And I think he would need to be somebody we'd be excited about, possibly a second or third option in a wide receiver core here. So I think you can be excited about the player, but I don't know that he's going to take some massive leap this year, unless it's just, oh, he's on the field and he plays for Bama, and then they bring somebody else in next year as a QB, and then now everyone, really gets excited, and now he blows up. So it might be like a year from now that you actually, kind of like gain value from this, or get any kind of returns from this ROI wise. But maybe it's good to get in on him now while at least I didn't even know who he was. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that didn't either. And I know that, as I get more and more into trying to figure out who the hell are going to be the players for these teams, I would have come up on, and found him, but maybe there's plenty of people that don't truly know Malik Benson just yet.
Yeah, that's right.
Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and dive into your favorite player. I think you had said he was wide receiver 1 on your board at some point. Jordan Tyson out of Colorado. We've talked to it, in DMs and everything about how much I love me some Jordan Tyson, and Aaron is not the biggest fan. We've had some discourse with that, but it's pretty funny. But there's some good stuff going on in Colorado. Obviously, we know that Deion Sanders is coming in, Shedeur Sanders is coming in, and while I'm maybe not as hyped about Shedeur Sanders as some people that I've heard, I think that he will be a step forward for or an improvement for Jordan Tyson. And Jordan Tyson blew up last year before getting hurt. I think he got hurt in like mid-November, early November, something like that. And right before that, like 3 or 4 games before that, he was averaging over 100 yards per game. He was clearly becoming the dominant number 1 wide receiver for a very bad offense. And yet he was still doing all these great things. Now, just, maybe Colorado doesn't all of a sudden win 12 games this year, but assume that they win 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever. Maybe they actually are able to put some, really big points on the board, and he truly takes a step forward. They brought in some players to Colorado, but no one that I'm like truly worried about as like, oh my God, there's no way that Jordan Tyson could possibly beat this player out. I get he wasn't some high level recruit or anything. Obviously going to Colorado, that makes a lot of sense. But I think that what he did on the field, if he can stay healthy, which we could basically say for just about any player, what he did last year really has me excited. And I really don't hear too many people talking about Jordan Tyson, but I have him much higher even than Devontae Walker. So even though I said that I'm very excited about Devontae Walker, I have Jordan Tyson above him. So I guess I shouldn't have said the one player you should go get, because this is the player you should go get.
Dang, that is a bold take for sure. And I will say that it's not that I hate him. It's definitely that I just don't have him that high. And I don't think the community is high on him. So you can get him really late in drafts. Like, for example, this recent mock, it's one draft, but I mean, he went undrafted through 19 rounds. So Jordan Tyson is off people's radars. And I made a point to go and watch him this week because I knew you were going to want to talk about this guy.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah, understandably so. And he actually flashed really well as a return threat, which I thought was interesting. So he's kind of this playmaker. And while he wasn't very involved in the offense as far as like his reception market share, like that was really 12%. Like that's not impressive. But ultimately, when he was making plays out there, when he did get the ball, he turned that into a lot of yards. And that way his receiving yards market share was actually pretty high. So if he can just take a step up, getting more of that share of that offense, that should be improved. Now, I mean, that'll be interesting. But I do think that that team, it'll score a lot more this year. I don't think it's going to translate to wins. I don't think it necessarily matters for fantasy production. But I think that 3, maybe 4 wins is realistic for them. Honestly, with their schedule, it's a really tough schedule this year. And I'm also not a Shadur Sanders mega fan by any means. I I think he's going to be kind of one of the overrated guys this offseason, just overdrafted in general. But that doesn't mean that Jordan Tyson cannot become the number one target there. Like you said, they didn't bring in that much talent. So I'm okay with that take. Toronto Dave just said in the chat, being a returner in college has some signal to NFL opportunity in general. And I definitely think that the NFL looks at that, how versatile you are as a playmaker, how explosive are you. So I don't mind that take as far as a deeper flyer in Jordan Tyson.
Yeah, that's where it gets tough because clearly I'm well far ahead of everyone else when it comes to Tyson. But it's just where do you actually rank somebody that no one else likes, but you believe can take a pretty big step forward, possibly even a leap forward, if you will, just because I think he was already doing that and then he got hurt. And obviously that's just a part of football. That's something we have to deal with, unfortunately. But I guess it just makes me think like what if he hadn't gotten hurt, what would he have done? And that's what I'm kind of hoping for. I think you had said they have a really tough schedule, and I don't really pay attention to any of that stuff, so like I believe you, but I still think that offense is going to be much better than it was last year. The team overall is going to be much better, and so he has an opportunity to really take a step forward, regardless of wins or anything like that. But yeah, Jordan Tyson, go get Jordan Tyson. All right, why don't I brought up one of my favorite players. Why don't you go ahead and pick the next one and tell us who you love here?
Okay, so it wouldn't be a great Devy devotional podcast episode if we didn't mention our friend Tank Bigsby. No, I'm just kidding. But Jarquez Hunter, his backup, is a very interesting option because if you look at how they produced, if you just compare them side to side, you'll be like, wow, he was actually much more efficient than Tank, and he actually got some volume. It's not like we're talking good efficiency on a couple of touches. No, like he got notable volume as a true freshman and in his second year this last year. And honestly, I mean, he's a guy who has good athleticism or good enough athleticism. He has some nice lateral moves to his game and displays some power. So it's not like he's a grinder. I think he's going to be a 4-5s type guy. I don't think he's a burner by any means, but that efficiency on a bad Auburn team, that's the excuse everybody uses for Tank, right? That bad team really made him less efficient, and I don't doubt that, but somehow Jarquez Hunter made it so he was efficient in that offense. So I don't know if there's some maybe contextual or situational factors there. Maybe he got more mop up duty or whatever the case was. But Jarquez is definitely an interesting guy, and he's a top 12 back in the 2024 class for me.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I actually question uh, his speed. I don't know. The big time run rate isn't exactly uh, 100% telling when it comes to like 40 times or anything like that. But when I see Jarquez Hunter has a 12% big time run rate, that leads me to believe that he either has speed, burst, or both. Some combination of the two. And so I don't have any idea how fast he actually is, but I do see that explosive nature that I love to see out of running backs, and that's why I'm perfectly fine having him here in the top 12 for the running backs, the 24 running backs, like you were saying. But the only thing is, he's not the he doesn't seem like he's much of a pass catcher. I guess, or at least that wasn't part of his game really. But it could just be that he was more of like the backup role. Maybe he'll take that step forward this year and hopefully become more of that. It wasn't like Tank was really much of a pass catcher either. He just did have a little bit more of that role. And honestly, while he was a part-time player, he didn't have that many fewer touches than Tank. I think it was like 75 less rush attempts. And so he didn't quite touch the ball as much, but he wasn't that far off, and yet he was so much better on a per touch basis than Tank Bigsby, which is one of the reasons why. And it's not that what my model looks at, but it's just one of the reasons why I look at it and go, Tank's not that great, because I can see a player like Jarquez being better on the same team in the same, the same opportunities, the same everything. Yes, obviously we know that when you have lower touches, that you're generally going to be a little bit more explosive and possibly more efficient because of that. But I don't know that the difference in touches was enough to be like, oh yeah, well that's why, because Tank had 400 touches. No, it's like Tank had 175 and Jarquez had 100, or whatever it was. It was something like that. Like, I don't think that's a big enough difference where we can be like, oh, that's why there was so much of a difference in efficiency there.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll even add to that or critique something because he was a good or a good receiving threat on that team in that backup role. So considering how many snaps he played, he had a 10% reception market share for Auburn this last year. Very good for running backs. And I mean, he had 17, so like counting stat wise, they're like, yeah, that's okay. But he was more efficient, like we said, 13.2 yards per reception on the year. So definitely some
And wasn't Tank at like 5 or 6 or something like that? It
yeah,
was,
he was 6. He was less than half. So
yeah.
definitely
And
some interesting things for Hunter.
I look more at for the model, at least I look more at like how the team uses them and not necessarily how efficient they are on those plays and that kind of thing. So that's good to know that he has that opportunity. I was just more saying the team wasn't like, oh, you're going to be out there on receiving downs and that kind of thing. And so sometimes that tells us enough anyway. But like I said, maybe it's just that he was more the backup. And this year, he'll have 20, 30 receptions. And then I'll say, oh, well, he's perfectly fine in the game. But I know that he was definitely more efficient, regardless if it was rushing or receiving, than Tank Bigsby.
Absolutely.
I think we're in lockstep here. But it's another one where not too many people talking about Jarquez Hunter as being an actual viable Devy running back. It's more of just like, oh, well, he's the starter now, like that kind of thing. But I actually think that he could be a legit Devy running back. No, it's not going to be Rocket Sanders level or anything like that. I don't ever believe that. But I do believe that he could be, at the very least, he could be a little bit better than Tank Bigsby. And look where Tank is going in this draft right now, where people have him late first, early second, like that kind of thing. We could see Jarquez Hunter being the same thing next year, and possibly a little bit better. Like I said, he actually has better numbers.
Oh yeah, and I think that this 24 class, and I understand the love for Rocket Sanders, and if Sanders does improve on what he's done, I think he's firmly in that top tier of backs in this class. But there is a lot of opportunity for guys to rise up in this class. There's not necessarily a Bijan. Like Jarquez could make that huge leap into the top couple of backs in the class. It is possible for sure. Unlike some other years where it wasn't really possible for anybody to jump in that tier with Bijan, for example, or you go back to some of the other classes. It's hard for those guys to jump up into the elites, where this class is kind of wide open in some ways in 2024. So yes, I am in agreement with you on a lot of things with Jarquez Hunter.
Love to see it. All right, let's talk about one that maybe we don't agree on here, because you put Alton McCaskill on the board here, and I'm not the biggest fan. So why don't you tell me why you love Alton, and then maybe we can start arguing.
Yeah, and I like him. I have him just a little bit lower than Hunter, for example. I did put him as a sleeper just because people are forgetting about what he did as a true freshman. So he was really, really good. And he was maybe a 4-star earlier in the process, but he ended up settling in as a higher 3-star recruit to Houston. And Alton McCaskill had a very impressive true freshman season just in counting stats. Now you can point to his efficiency numbers and say, well, yeah, his yards per carry wasn't great. His yards per reception wasn't great. And then you go to his teammates, and he was the best running back out of the whole group. He was very efficient compared to his backfield mates. And then you look at his high school 100-meter track times. He's a 10.9 guy, so he's breaking that 11-second barrier there. So he has solid speed. I liked his receiving involvement, even if, again, it wasn't efficient. They were just throwing him dump-off passes, and he was just getting hit right away. But honestly, he was very involved as a true freshman. And Houston, don't forget that they're moving to the Big 12 as of this July. So a jump up in competition, but also the NFL is going to like that. So ultimately, we're forgetting about him because of the ACL tear, but he's healthy. He's ready to go heading into this spring is everything that I've heard. So at least we don't have that unknown of like, oh, will he be back? Will he be practicing this spring and summer? Like, yes, he is going to be back. It's very telling that a team wanted to get him so involved as a true freshman. And again, those high school athletic testing numbers, they're not everything, but it shows that he's a decent athlete, and he was better than all of his competition as a true freshman. I don't see any reason for them not to get him back involved in that lead back role this year.
Yeah, and I get it. With him missing his sophomore year, he definitely could have taken that step forward. Like, I'm not comparing the players, but like a Rocket Sanders did, where people liked Raheem Sanders, but he wasn't the RB1 in the class, by any means. So he could have taken the next step forward. I guess the reason why I'm lower on him, and I get the context of missing the sophomore year, so like I can't make a true argument. I'm not saying he's terrible or anything like that. He, just like we were talking about with Jordan Tyson, he didn't get that chance to really continue on to take that step forward to become the wide receiver one in the class. No. So, but with McCaskill, I get it was for his freshman year, but like nothing really stood out as being amazing. He didn't really do anything. His yards per carry 5.1 in the American, in G5, scrim yards per game 75. The only thing that really like looks good is his PPR points per touch, which is 1.1. But once again, when we're talking about the American Conference, it doesn't really blow me away or anything like that. So I just think that he's kind of meh, and I wonder if he's ever going to be more than that. His big time run rate 6%. That maybe he's not quite the athlete. But once again, I'm not saying that's not the end all be all, and that doesn't tell 40 times or anything like that. It's just kind of one thing that I look at to say, do I think he's athletic or not? 6% isn't terrible, but it's also not amazing or anything either. So I would just like for him to have done a little bit more in the American Conference, where we, maybe would be like, okay, he's just that much better than all these shitty guys.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just because he was better than his backfield mates doesn't make him a great back in general. But I think that as a true freshman, getting that amount of volume, and he's 215 pounds, like there's some things going his way, but like you said, he needs to improve, and we have to project some of these things going forward. So I'm projecting for him to hopefully be a little bit better, but coming off an injury, it's not guaranteed. I don't think that he should be going within like the first 8, 9, 10 rounds of a C2C startup, for example, or Devy startup. But like after that, I mean, start taking him if people actually forgot that he could be a lead back this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's worth being on a roster, especially when we're talking about C2C. I just don't know that I'm overly excited about him, and I honestly don't know. Like, where would you value him? Being that this is technically more of a Devy pod, and we definitely talk about C2C though. Uh, where would you value him in a Devy draft, or on Devy rosters? Whether you had to pick someone up, trade for him, or how I guess the easiest question would be like, if you were in a Devy draft right now, how many rounds would you have to go before you would pick up Alt McCaskill?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, 10 need to pass probably before I'm willing to draft him. And I mean, everybody has supplemental drafts too, so that can throw a wrench into things. I'm talking more startups. If he's somehow still available in supplemental, that bumps him up, of course. But I don't know. I'm taking him over some guys who have kind of flamed out, like Kendall Milton, Georgia. Um, Probably Evan Pryor, just because he's so blocked there at Ohio State. I like the talent and the explosiveness of Evan Pryor more, but I'm taking him above Jabari Small, Tennessee, above Logan Diggs, Audric Estime, Notre Dame backs. I don't think either one of those are going to break out enough, going to be the lead back in their situations there, or going to be good enough, quite frankly, to be a day 2 drafted running back. So that's kind of where I have him. I know some of those things might be bold, but that's the range. Those are the players that I'm taking him above, for example.
No, I like it. It's actually pretty funny. I have him 5 spots ahead of Jabari Small. So like when I was looking at Small's name when you said it, and I was like, no way. I have like Jalen Berger, Cartavius Norton, Sevian Morrison, like just a bunch of names that I don't care about. But I mean, that's kind of where he's around though. Like, not overly excited about it, but he also has the chance to take a step forward where most of those players are probably already figured out. Like we've already figured out who those players are at least a little bit better. So I don't mind. I guess when you put him on this list, I was thinking that you were like high on him. And now it sounds like you're just being like, hey, he could do something. He could have a shot. And so I'm a little more on board than when I was thinking you're like, no, get this guy on your team right now.
Yeah, I did list him as like the number 1 running back, but that was not by
You did.
yeah, that was not my intent to say he's probably the last of that group, but yes, he's on my radar for sure.
All right, let's get to a running back that I think you are a little more excited about, and that's Jace McClellan out of Alabama. We cannot guarantee who is going to be the starting running back, or if there even will be a true workhorse starter for Bama this year. But I think that our buddy Levi Valentine did some pretty good research showing that these even like 5-star prospects coming into Alabama, these 5-star recruits don't do anything in year 1 at Alabama. It just does not happen. Derrick Henry didn't touch the ball year 1, or barely touched the ball year 1. Think about that. Derrick Henry, everything he did for Alabama, barely touched the ball year 1. Like all of these players, I forget. Do you remember who it was? There was the last time that a true freshman, was it Mark Ingram? I don't remember who it was, but it was quite a while ago. The last time a true freshman actually like stepped on the field and was the lead back for the season.
Right. I mean, all I remember was Trey Sanders said he was going to win the Heisman as a true freshman for Alabama. So
But the point is, there's 2 5-star recruits coming in this year, and so people might be a little concerned, even myself included. I was like, well, Jason McClellan's just done, like he's just gone. I'll add in Jamorian Miller from last year, and you start thinking like, well, how the hell is Jason McClellan even going to get on the field? But if we kind of assume that those 2 freshman recruits are not a part of the game plan at all, now it's Jamorian Miller and Jason McClellan, and next thing you know, maybe you have a 2-headed monster, and McClellan could actually be viable. So while I don't really, that's not true. I like Jace McClellan. I was actually very high on him last year, but when he really just didn't do much, it just became hard to truly keep up with that love that I had for him. I believe in the talent. I don't know if Alabama necessarily does, but and then again, you have somebody that like Jahmyr Gibbs, like he's always going to play over somebody like a Jace McClellan. So What do you think are the odds of him actually taking the lead spot here? How do you feel about Jamari Miller? And then, and what about the other recruits? Do you think that Levi's right here where they're just really not going to see the field?
I would say that I agree with that take. These true freshmen are not likely to see meaningful touches outside of garbage time, but just like Branson Robinson did at Georgia, they'll flash when they're on the field. But ultimately, the meaningful touches should go to these upperclassmen. And I'm about to kind of just blow the whole show sheet open here. I'm going to reveal a couple guys because it proves a greater point of a lot of these guys on this list of sleepers are being slept upon or shoved aside and just not talked about enough because of past injuries. So Chase McClellan tears his ACL. He's out. We just talked about Alton McCaskill tore his ACL, and he's bumped significantly down the ranks. Maybe we can talk about E.J. Smith, Stanford running back, or Marshawn Lloyd, former South Carolina to USC transfer. Trey Benson, Florida State running back, who tore his ACL at Oregon in his first season. And there's a common trend here, which I guess I didn't really even put that together until now that we're talking about it. But these guys that were good recruits coming out, or maybe the talent was always there, but it's taken them a little bit longer to get there. Like Braylon Allen. If Braylon Allen tore his ACL a little bit into his true freshman season, the discussion around him would be just like these guys. Oh, he has the talent to make a step forward. Look at what he did in a small sample. And if we look at last year, Jace McClellan's sample, he was actually pretty good. Like, he was quietly that second fiddle for Alabama. So not only like volume wise was he the next guy up, but then also he was almost as good as Gibbs when you break it down to like a per touch basis, from some efficiency measures. He's not going to hit on all of them because Gibbs was just this very, very good back, and especially receiving back. But Chase McClellan was a top end number 6. I think that was a high 4-star recruit coming out. It was unfortunate that he tore his ACL, and that's really why in 2021 he didn't do a whole lot. But I think he's ready. Like you said, the opportunity is likely there, and I don't care if he has to split some of the carries, but Bama likes to go with a guy, and the next guy up, just all the arrows are pointing to Jace McClellan, and buy on that uncertainty that people have. Like, I know he hasn't been anointed that starter yet, but just take a leap of faith, take that dart throw or that gamble on him, because it might not pay off, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, but it certainly could pay off big time as an Alabama back if he does go off this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just looking through. We do have to speed up a little bit just because I just realized what time it is. And unfortunately, I have to jump off here and then jump onto the Full Tilt Devy pod. So make sure you follow me over there. Look out for that tweet. Or you can go to the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast network on YouTube and wait for us there. Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, well, maybe it's a good idea then that I kind of blew up some of those names, right? Just to throw them out there as considerations, right? So I can go through them again.
I know. I actually think it was perfect because as you were talking, I'm looking through my ranks, and I have Marshawn Lloyd and Trey Benson back to back, and then I have Jace McClellan 2 spots behind them. Now you could probably move McClellan ahead if you wanted to, just because of Bama, and that'd be, but this is just more looking at production and that kind of thing. I'm not technically ranking them, but it's just the ranking of the production. But they're all right there in that like pretty good tier. Not amazing, not studly, but I hate to bring things back to Tank Bigsby every single time, but it's in that Tank Bigsby range. Like could be drafted, maybe even should be drafted, like that kind of thing. But maybe not like a true stud, like I was talking about. And then I think you had listed Damian Martinez. I don't think you really talked about him at all, but he's not even that far off. Actually, I have Damian Martinez ahead of those guys. Do you feel the same way there?
Yeah, I was curious whether he really showed up in your model because he was very good. And I'd be curious to see, guys like Jamorian Miller, he gets the Bama bump. He probably is going to get better draft capital unless Damian Martinez truly blows up at Oregon State. But yeah, Martinez is a guy I really moved up significantly this offseason. He is a top 6 back in the 2025 class for me. And I think what he did as a decent recruit coming out of Texas, very productive player in high school. He had a very productive first season at Oregon State. He was the best back there. He was really gaining some ground on the competition there, and he got a little bit banged up, if I remember correctly, down the season. But he's got enough athleticism to his game. He's going to be in a good system, an up and coming team. Really intriguing, both CFF upside, so college production, but then also for NFL potential. Damian Martinez is 5'10, 220 pounds. I'd love to see that size and him maintaining that athleticism and burst. So he's a guy I'm high on too.
Yeah, I actually I don't know. Maybe it's his name. When I hear Damian Martinez, I don't think of a running back. And so I even saw him on this list and I was like, oh God. And then I looked at my ranks. I'm like, wait, I'm actually pretty high on this guy. So it's kind of funny, but he's actually my running back 6 in the 25 class. So he's right there, not quite top 5, but he's really not that far behind. I have him one spot ahead of Katron Allen. So, I like Damian Martinez. He didn't do amazing things per play year one. Like his PPR points per touch are like 0.9, I think it is, which I really like to see people at the 1.0 and above. When it comes to the PPR points per touch, like those top players that you think they're like the true studs are like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 PPR points per touch. He's sitting at 0.9. It's not the end all be all. It's not, it doesn't mean that he can't be good or anything like that. But he did a lot of good things. He has quality size, and he was just a freshman. He can always take a step forward. Like maybe, I said that I wasn't all that high on Will Shipley after his freshman season, and he kind of took a step forward. So maybe we could see the same thing from a Damian Martinez, a little bit better running, that kind of thing. I'm very excited about him. Do you know where he's going in drafts right now? Is he a true sleeper? And you can look it up if you don't have it in front of you right now.
There's definitely some hype for him. All I know right now is that he was in the 6th round in this startup mock, so he's actually going pretty high. And I think people are catching on, but that doesn't mean that every league's going to be that way. So if you're able to snag him later than that, then that's awesome. But I think that's a fair range for him, especially if you're playing in a C2C format, which rewards that college production. So in Devy, I still would take him in that range, but knowing C2C, you get an even bigger boost.
I agree. All right, so we're going to have to skip a couple players here, but I did want to talk about Bryson Nesbitt, who you've been a pretty big fan of for a while now. Kind of this very similar situation where he's going to be one of very few people viable in the North Carolina offense, most likely, and he's one of the few people that was actually there from last year. So he already has a chemistry with Drake May. We saw him do, I don't want to say big things, but do well in that offense last year. And, do you think he could take a step forward, or do you think it's just going to be, the lack of target competition that he could just be a little bit better this year?
Yeah, I mean, he has a couple of options, right? He can stay at the same level, which would be disappointing for us, honestly, but he could have some growth as a player, and I think that we'd like to project that. Guy's getting better year after year, and certainly the opportunity is getting, well, it's more wide open, so he could step into a larger role. I don't know how the offensive coordinator is ultimately going to use him, but he's that hybrid guy who can play out wide, who can line up a little bit as a traditional tight end, but he's still developing that part of his game. So I will be watching his weight very closely. One source I saw 230 pounds, and the other source I saw 245 pounds. So at a 6'6" frame, he needs to be 245, 250, but he's a good athletic tight end with really nice ball skills, honestly. So that's intriguing when he's paired with Drake May and based on what he's done thus far into his career. So he's flashed well. But yes, he needs to step up, certainly. And if you look at that 2024 tight end class, like there's a lot of uncertainty there. So why couldn't he be the next guy after Brock Bowers and Jatavian Sanders?
I like it. And then I have 3 players here. We probably only have enough time to talk about like 1 or 2 of them. But I have Jeremiah Hunter, Johnny Wilson, and Keon Coleman, wide receivers. And I'm pretty damn high on all 3. And I'll tell you what, like I've heard some Keon Coleman talk recently, nothing too crazy. I don't know how people truly feel about him, but I have not really heard anyone talking about Johnny Wilson, and I definitely have not heard a single person talking about Jeremiah Hunter. I think it's mostly because he played for Cal, and who cares about Cal? But I wonder how you feel about Johnny Wilson, because I get the concerns that there's not too many 6'7" wide receivers that have ever actually truly hit in the NFL. But man, he's kind of exciting.
He's exciting. I don't see it with him on the film. I have to say, I watched him and it was fun seeing some of the plays that he pulled off, but I just don't see the translation. So in college, I get the appeal, and production wise, he did some interesting things, but it was not special enough for me to say I really think this guy is going to have a massive season. But I think FSU could support a couple of receiving options this next season. So that's exciting for him. I think he'll be a good college player, probably a day 3 type guy next year. And he gets a lot of hate. Like you said, he's not really being talked about a lot, but from the few times I've heard him referenced on other Devy podcasts and otherwise, it's never really been good things that have been said about him. And I think he's underrated. Like you said, some of the metrics would back that up. But I was actually more interested by Keon Coleman and Jeremiah Hunter. Of the guys you mentioned, you hit it the nail on the head there. Jeremiah Hunter at Cal, doesn't matter how impressive he's been as far as, being consistently involved in that offense when the offense is kind of poor for the receiving game. And I don't think this year it's suddenly going to become a great passing attack either. So unfortunately, the NFL is going to have to look past raw stats, raw numbers, and hopefully he's a good tester. I think he's fairly athletic. And Keon Coleman's kind of in that same boat too, where I don't know. He's this taller wide receiver where I think he has a little bit more translatable traits compared to Johnny Wilson, but I'm also not seeing like superstar unless he develops a bit. But Keon Coleman is definitely the highest out of the group, and then I have Jeremiah Hunter as well. He's just a little bit lower. I think he's my wide receiver 31 in the 2024 class. So that's where I have Jeremiah Hunter, and then Keon Coleman is my wide receiver 23 in the 2024 class.
Way too low. Way too low. All right, so I think a lot of people are pretty excited about J. Michael Sturdivant, and yet he was outproduced by Jeremiah Hunter, albeit sophomore versus junior, but he was outproduced in the same exact offense, the shitty offense that we were talking about at Cal, on every single basis, like yards per reception, 16.5 versus 11.1. The amount of receptions, the yardage, all that kind of stuff. He was just outproduced, and yet we're overly excited about J. Michael Sturdivant going over wherever the hell he's going, UCLA, I don't remember. But we're excited about him, and yet we're not excited about Hunter. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like this is the kind of stuff that blows my mind in Devy. Like this guy got beat out by this player, and yet we're more excited about this play. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, we are suckers for youth, and I think that's a great thing to exploit in your drafts, right? These guys they've done pretty well for themselves, but they're still getting past.
It's not like Jeremiah Hunter is like a super senior or something. Like I get it if it's that big of a discrepancy, but when we're talking about 1 year, and especially sophomore and junior, I don't think that's that big of enough of a difference there to where we're like, oh, we have to take the sophomore here. No, like let's take the better player.
Yeah, and I mean he will be a senior going into this next year. Hunter will be.
Well, I just meant last year, sophomore versus junior last year.
Absolutely, and like you said, he's done plenty. He deserves, well, at least to be more in that conversation with J. Michael Sturdivant compared to, like you said, like way behind him in a lot of ranks and conversations.
Yeah, and once again, I'm not trying to say Jeremiah Hunter's like a stud or anything like that. It's just that he is a sleeper, and I tend to fall in love with these sleepers because no one talks about him. And I'm going to talk about this player, and so I'm going to talk about Jeremiah Hunter. God damn it! And then I'm going to talk about Johnny Wilson. It's hilarious. I put Johnny Wilson on our show sheet this morning, and Aaron was like, "Oh, Wilson, really?" And then I turned on the Devy Marketplace, and they were talking about some 2024 QBs and stuff, and they just happened to talk about Johnny Wilson. I think they were talking about Jordan Travis, and then they just happened to talk about Johnny Wilson, and Shane Hallam was like, "Oh yeah, Johnny Wilson, I like him." That was the first time I've ever heard anyone talk about Johnny Wilson and say that they liked him, and so I was pretty excited about that. But it was just so coincidental that we were going to talk about him tonight, and I finally heard his name mentioned.
That is pretty cool, and I will say I've heard him talked about in the past. Like you said, it's always like, oh, he dropped these balls, or he's sloppy with this and that, and it's these small critiques that I think come with being a bigger player like he is. Like you said, he's a gigantic, tall wide receiver, but I mean, he reminds me a little bit of Auden Tate, but probably more explosive. So that's a very interesting thing in itself.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I got to get out of here, but why don't we talk really quick about, or just list out the rest of the players that you had mentioned? You had talked about Ruben Owens. Is he a sleeper? Isn't he like a stud freshman that everyone loves?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just briefly explain there. I don't see him grouped ever with the Cedric Baxters, the Justice Haynes, the Roderick Robinsons. And those guys, some of the listeners might not know them yet, but those are the top incoming guys as far as the running backs are concerned in the 2026 class. And I don't know, Baxter, Haynes, Robinson, I love him, but Ruben Owens is right up there with him. I think he's this athletic guy who's going to come into opportunity right away. I just don't see the respect for him, I guess, out there. So I will call him a little bit of a sleeper in the
Okay.
context that he is a 5-star type player that people are just, there's not like red flags or anything. He's 190 pounds and people are like, you can't succeed with that, but that's rubbish. I mean, these guys, they put on an average of 15 pounds typically in college, unless they're like a chain who's trying to train for track and stay really light and fast. So I don't think there's any issues. I think Ruben Owens actually will come in closer to 200 once he hits the fall. So I think that's also a big factor as well, going into that ranking for me.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I like Owens as well, and if he's not getting the respect because of the size, uh, I think we've talked about it in the past how 190 is kind of that threshold for me coming in as a freshman. If they can hit that 190 threshold, I don't really care at that point. Like I feel pretty good. Maybe they're not going to be the Bijan Robinson level, because they can't hit that. They're never going to hit that. But they could still be a quality running back, somebody that you should draft and that kind of thing. And obviously, you could even be, depending on the player, like a Jameer Gibbs, where I don't even care that he's 200 pounds. He's just that damn good. But the rest of the list, we have Squirrel White out of Tennessee. He's interesting for sure. I don't know that I think he's a stud or anything, but he definitely could be a sleeper. And I think they're doing some big things in Tennessee, especially bringing in the 5-star QB and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's somebody's going to catch that ball, and it's a high flying, prolific offense. So, investing in Squirrel White probably isn't the worst decision you've ever made. Regardless of how you feel about the player. One of my favorite sleeper running backs that I really don't hear too many people talking about is Bucky Irving, Marquise, right? Marquise Irving. And I get that he's smaller. He's a smaller back, but man, he did some big things there in the Pac-12. And then we wanted to bring up at least one QB. We kind of went back and forth on some names, but Jalen Daniels has the opportunity to take a step forward this year. And I don't think he's ever going to be like a top tier guy. He's not going to be in that Caleb Williams, Drake May level. He probably won't even be in that damn, I hate the guy so much I can't even think of his damn
Quinn
name.
Ewers,
Quinn Ewers, thank you. I was thinking of Drew Alar for some reason.
Bo Nix.
But yeah. He's not going to be necessarily in the Quinn Ewers level if Quinn can, take a step forward from what he did last year. But I think he could be in that tier below that, like draftable, like that kind of thing. Especially if he does what he did this past year before injury. Like he made some big strides from his first couple of years. So I do think Jalen Daniels has the accuracy, the athleticism, like everything that we're kind of looking for to be a quality NFL QB. He just needs to put it all together for a full season so the NFL can go, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and draft this guy.
Yeah, no, I get it with Daniels. And going back to Irving, I mean, he's similar to a chain in some ways where size is the big thing. And I think the limitation with Irving is more so that he came into college and he was really light. Like, I want to say he was 175. So for him to be
Wow.
put on this much weight, to be in the 190 range, he's going to need to do even more work to get up to that 200 plus. So he is very, very good for his size. I think for CFF or C2C leagues, he offers a little bit more of that production compared to Devy. There's a chance he just never quite gets up to that size, but he's a good receiving back too. So honestly, in PPR leagues, it could be a nice stash for potential NFL production. And then Squirrel White, we don't have to go in depth with him, but I just think that he's one of those guys who could truly break out for Tennessee this season. If you like what Xavier Worthy's done, I mean, I think that Squirrel White's going to do stuff like that. And maybe not at quite as young of an age, sure, but like as a true freshman, he flashed big time down the stretch. So I have him pretty high in that 2025 class. So Squirrel White needs to be on radars for Devy, and then he's already on radars in a lot of C2C leagues as well.
Sorry, I was looking up Squirrel. I just wanted to see where I had him in the ranks. Yeah, I mean, I don't have him. I don't have him too high. He's okay. He's okay. But like I said, there's worse things to invest in, and he could take a step forward because there was obviously some good quality wide receivers, NFL wide receivers, in Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt there previously. So he could take a step forward because of that. And then, real quick, I just want you had talked about Bucky Irving not quite being the NFL size that we're looking for. All that I heavily discount size for running backs if they're small. Like I'm like, no, dude, I don't want you. And yet Bucky Irving still stands out in the Devy model. This is not a C2C model. This is a Devy model. So the fact that he's up there fairly high really leads me to believe that it could be another Devin Chain level player where we don't care about his size or, not as much about his size because he has elite other attributes, that kind of thing. But it's 9:15. Let me go ahead and get out of here. I think, hopefully you guys were able to take advantage, or hopefully you will be able to take advantage of some of these sleepers. Go trade for them, get them before your supplementals, before your or in the supplemental drafts when you don't feel great about a certain pick or whatever. Go get some of these players. And, like some of them are going to be 5th, 6th round picks. Some of them are going to be 10th, 12th, 15th round picks. So, it just really depends on the time and everything. But go get these players. I'm going to go to the Full Tilt Devy podcast now. So make sure you switch over to there. But thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us, or joining me, I should say. Thank you so much for listening to us, everybody. And for now, we are cashing out. See you.